Hey everyone, I'm going to be showing you a CSS tutorial today, and I'm going to be creating a toggle button with pure CSS and HTML and just a tiny little bit of JavaScript, of course, to toggle the class on and off. Technically we could do this without JavaScript because you can use chatbots, but I'll show you how to actually make this useful so that you can actually perform an action with your toggle button. But the real gist is going to be your CSS and HTML, and all you need is one button element. Alright, so let's jump right in. So I have Visual Studio Code open, and I'm going to create a new file, and I'm automatically going to create the folder as a part of this process. So we're going to call it CSS toggle button /index.html, and then within this folder we're going to create another file under CSS called toggle.css. Alright, and then all we need to do in here is, using the built-in edit extension, we can create the boilerplate code for our HTML, link our CSS. Oops, I am typing really badly today. Alright. CSS/toggle CSS, there it is. And in the body, all we need to do is add a button. And we're not going to add a class to it, even though you could. But for the sake of this tutorial, I'm not going to bother to add a class. I'm just going to use the button element as the selector. Alright, so within this, you don't need to type anything, don't need to add anything. You can just leave your button as is, and Control S to save. So over here, this is where the real action will happen in our CSS code. So creating a declaration block with the selector button, you can type in border. That's the first thing we want to add. So border will be 3px solid, and we're going to give it a kind of gray background. Let me not use RGB this time. I normally do, but this time I'm going to use a hex value. So let's go with 35, 35, 35. Or let's make it a little later than that. Maybe, how about 65 instead? That ought to do it. And next we are going to round the corners of our button. So border radius will be, let's go with about 8px. That should be good. Then we are going to put the background color as white. So FF. Move that up to the top. I like to keep everything in alphabetical order. What else do we need to add? Width and height. So we can either add width and height directly, or we can go with aspect ratio and just use one or the other. So in this case, I'm going to add width and put it to let's go with about 50 pixels. That should be good. I mean, we could make this button really huge, and 50 pixels is pretty big. So for aspect ratio, I'm going to use a value of 2:1. Oh, and another thing, I have an extension installed that will allow us to preview this. So going back to index.html, let's go to the command palette and enable live server preview. Alright, doesn't seem to want to open the live server. Oh, there it is. It's taking a while. Alright, so there's our button. Looks pretty nice already. Alright, let me split this down because sometimes dragging it doesn't work. So, split down. And I'm going to drag this down to here and close this extra window. Okay, there is our button, as I said. So we have basically the essence of the button in place. We can probably roam this border a little bit more, so I'm going to increase the border radius to 18 instead. And do I need to add anything else? I don't think so. Maybe I'll just make it a little less wide than it is currently. So let's go with a value of maybe 36. I think 36 by 18 should be a little better for a toggle button. Alright, so next thing we're going to use is some pseudo elements. So first of all, we need button after and button before. And the reason I'm joining the two of these together is because we're going to actually share a property between them, and that is position absolute. And I forgot to add this before. Position relative needs to be on the parent. Now, what I'm going to do at this point, actually, this isn't necessary, but I'm going to actually put this button in the center of the page. So I'm going to select the body, put the height to 100 v-width, and the width, 100 v-h, sorry, that should be view height, not view width. And the width I'm going to set to 100 view width. Then I'm going to set display to flex, justify content center, and align item center. And there it is. So now our toggle button is in the center of the page and much prettier in my opinion. I think layout is important to things looking good. So now we have all of that in place. Let us go ahead and style our pseudo elements. But before we do that, one little thing I forgot to do that we can share again is content, and we're going to make it empty this time. They don't actually need any content, so just you can put two whatever you call those things. I forgot what they're called. Yeah, but you can put two quotes basically and leave them empty. They don't need any content. So button after we're going to actually, you know what, instead of not putting content in either one, what I'm going to do, let me move content down to button before. I just changed my mind on the fly. I know that's a little erratic, and this is a tutorial, but hey, that's what designers do. So before won't have any content and after will. So let's actually add some content to after, and this is going to say toggle button, or toggle is, let's use toggle is off. And now we need to position this correctly, so let's put it to right of, oops, I forgot to close this property value here. So let's put right to 105% or so. That should do it. Oh wait, that should be a, yeah, I did that incorrectly. Let me put this, I wanted to put this on the right, so let me put this on the left by putting right to negative, let me see, 105. Okay, yeah, it's gonna need some more space than that. So let me change right to left. Sometimes as you're designing these things happen. Right, that's what I needed. Left 135% should do it. Top of 0. We could probably move this up a little bit. So like 15%, minus 15%, or okay, more than that. Sometimes you have to play with your values until you get the exact amount that you want. Another cool trick we can use here is let me not add this to both. Let me add this to after. You can use width of fit content, but for Chrome you're going to have to use WebKit fit content. Now what this should do is whatever your content is, the element should stretch to that amount. In this case it didn't, so I'm guessing that this preview plugin doesn't support it. So you can still remember this, but I'm going to change it just because it obviously did not work for the live preview plugin that we're using. Probably uses an older version of Chrome that doesn't support that particular feature. Alright, so I'm just going to play with my values till I get them correct. Alright, 300% should do it. And then we can move this down even further till we get it in the center. Alright, so good. Alright, sorry if you got a little confused there. I just like to have things perfect and, you know, looking a certain way. So now the fun begins to actually make this toggle on and off. So come to think of it, we're actually going to have to add a class to this, but we're not going to add that in the HTML code. We're going to use JavaScript to do that. Alright, so right, let's add a background color to our before pseudo element. I think I'm going to go with aqua in this case. I actually wanted the hex value, so let me write it out instead of just... Right. They said that was 00 FFFF. Right. So that should be good. And in fact, let me make this a little darker because it may not be immediately visible for everyone. Right. So I'm going to make this one darker. Good, that should be good there. The width of this element, we're going to make it 50%. Height will be 100%. By the way, don't mind my very poor typing. It's neither here nor there, but don't mind my very poor typing. Alright, so width is 50%, height is 100%. Actually, there's another way we can do this instead of setting width and height. But, yeah, I think I'm going to use that in fact, because we're going to use transform to move it around. So, put top to 0, bottom to 0. We could have used inset for this one as well, which is to do all these values at once, but I prefer to write them all out because inset may not be supported in all browsers. So, top, bottom, left will be 0 as well, and right will be 50%. Right, so there we go. Now it is halfway across the button. And border radius. Let's make that 50% so that is fully rounded. Or we can make it 100% because this sometimes doesn't round the element as much as you want. Okay, probably just the width in this case that's causing that issue. It looks a little bit oblong to me. So I'm probably going to need to make this, yeah, that should do it. Around, or maybe let me make it like 60. Yeah, that makes it look a little more round. That's more like what I wanted. Now, I'm going to add a transformation to this because as you can see there are some slight jagged edges and I don't want those, so we're going to add transform scale. We don't need X or Y, just transform scale and 1.25%. Oops, sorry, 1.25. I don't need percent. That will actually give me the opposite result than what I want. And we're going to also translate on the y axis about 2 pixels, so negative 2px. Oh wait, I went the wrong direction, my bad. Alright, 1 pixel should do it then. Okay, maybe that translation is not as exact as I wanted. And this is one of the challenges sometimes with design, is that sometimes getting exact values is a little tricky. So it can frustrate those who are perfectionists like me and want things to be exact. So I'm just tweaking some values here. You don't need to do this. You can completely ignore me on this point and even skip forward the video if you want. Alright, I think I'm going to leave it there. It looks relatively okay. Let's move it to the left just a little bit. Yeah, 1 pixel or so should be good. Okay, enough tweaking on my part. Now let's actually make this toggle. So, we're going to add a highlight value. Well, highlight decoration block, sorry, which is button hover, so that when you hover over the button it actually does something. Alright, so when the button is hovered, we're going to add a box shadow, and I think Aqua is pretty good for this. So let me see, 0, 0, 8 pixels, and 0, 0, FFFF, was it? Yes, there we go. And then, oh, let me add a transition value to our button. I forgot to do this earlier. So transition all 0.25 seconds, ease in out for our timing function. And now let's see how this looks. Good, so there we go. Now we have a nice glow whenever we put the mouse over it. And we can also duplicate this and change the before elements background color. Now I don't usually use hex values, so if you see me playing around here, it's simply me trying to figure some stuff out. I don't really like using hex values because I usually work with RGB for just about everything, and I'm actually going to go right ahead and do that this time because it's easier for me to remember red, green, and blue values than it is other stuff. Alright, that should be good there. Now I also need to add a transition to the before value. So what I'm going to do actually is add a CSS variable. So we're going to use root, and then we're going to have transition. Just making sure I spelled that correctly. Alright, transition, and we're going to copy the value from transition under button. So cut that, paste it here, and then under this one we're going to put var transition, copy this, and drop it in here. Now I could have avoided some code duplication, but I still would have to add some extra lines, and at the end of the day it's not really that big of a deal, so I'm not going to actually do it this time. But normally I would advise you, if you're going to be sharing values like these, create something like what I did here and share those values between those two declarations, so you don't have to duplicate stuff all over the place. You can change it all at once. But CSS variables already cover some of that duplication issue. So if I change this variable, I'll be changing the timing of anything that uses it. Okay, so let's just look and see how this looks now. Good, so it has a nice animation. I think I'm going to slow down that animation a little bit though, because Although it is visible, it is not as smooth in my opinion because it's a little fast. So let me just slow it down and see how it looks. Good, that's better. Oh, and one last thing I want to change is the border color of the button on hover. So I'm going to use an RGBA value, sorry, and I'm going to put 35, 35, 35.5. Alright, let's go with 0.2. That may be a little more like what I want. Right, there we go. And now we are going to add a class, and this class is toggled, and what toggle will do is when it is added to the button, it will move the pseudo element, the before pseudo element, to the right, and it will change the content of after. So toggled before. And all we need to do is change just about one value here, which would be left. And for left, we are going to add, well, we're going to use 50%. And then for after, well, toggled, sorry, after, we are going to put content to toggle is on with an exclamation point, of course. Now, the other thing we should do here is, alright, it already has, I forgot it already has the transition, so I don't need to actually tell you to do that, I was about to. So this will move itself automatically when you click the button. So now let's actually make it clickable. So for that, what we are going to do is add an onClick attribute, and we are going to use a function, but I'm not going to write the function in here. I'm going to put toggle as our function and then write that function down here in a script. So add script function toggle. Oops. My fingers always hit the wrong thing, especially on this keyboard I'm using. Okay, so in the function toggle, we are going to, oh, I forgot to give this an ID, because this is easier than using like a query selector or something to find the element. So let's use an ID, and we're going to call it toggle. So in this function, what we're going to do is document get element by ID toggle class list add, and we are going to add toggled to the class, well, to the class list. But what we can do is actually make this even more efficient, so it actually does toggle and not just turn the button on. So I'm gonna cut that out and add an if statement. If, in fact, let me paste this back in and copy something here a minute. Make this easier. Let's add a variable. So let I could use const for this too, but I'm going to use let in this case. Let e equal document get element by ID toggle class list. No, let me see. How can I'm trying to think quickly how I should do this. If I should use a boolean or if I should just do this the hard way. Alright, let's leave it at contains. Well, at class list, sorry. So, cut this, add an if statement, and if e contains toggles, and we're going to paste this here, and I'm going to duplicate it. Don't worry, I'm going to make this make sense in a minute. My brain is moving at 90 miles an hour right now. Alright, so if it contains toggled class list, let's actually make that equal to a blank class list. So it will be empty. And then we're going to add else and move this up into here. So if it does not contain toggled, it will add it. Alright, let me just make sure I got that right. There, we did. And the only problem is something in our CSS that I obviously did incorrectly. Oh, I see what I did wrong. I forgot to change the right value to 0, so let's put right 0, and that should fix it. Good. Now as you can see, it stretches it a little bit, so we need to change left just a little. Let's go with like 52 or maybe 55%. Or no, I forgot that I had right at 60, so that's why it wasn't as that. So there we go. Nice. See, so now our toggle button works perfectly. We can make this even more interesting by changing the color of the before element. So background color, let's go with something like red, and we can even transform it so that when it is toggled, the button actually scales. So we're going to scale it to 2 when it is on, and when it's off, it will be at a normal size. And you can play with these values as much as you want. So like, where is it? Alright, here I'm going to change this to 0.935, and the top value I'm going to move it to 1 pixel down. Okay, that's still a lot. Sometimes you have to really play with these values to get them exactly right, which can be a little bit frustrating with CSS. Alright, it doesn't really want to go into position as I want it, so let me see if I change this to 0.9 if that will work. I should actually be doing the math on this, because then I'll be able to get exact values, but not today. What I will say is those CSS designers, developers if you want to call us that, should be paid more, but that's just a little side note there for you. Alright, that's ridiculously small, so alright, I'm gonna leave it at 0. Oops, I did not mean to press 1 there. I'm gonna leave it at 0. That should be not too bad. But yeah, you can see the basic concept. If I were to actually do the proper math on this, I could make it even better, but I chose not to in this case. But you can see how cool this looks. So there you go. You can play with these as much as you want and make this look as cool as you want. Like I can add font weight to this. Make it like 400. Okay, that didn't change. I forget sometimes these fonts can be a little silly. You need something like 600. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Alright, let me add a transition to the after as well. Oops. Yeah, it's not a smooth changing font with the transition, but you get the point. If you use a variable font, that will look really smooth, so you could grab one from Google Fonts if you want and play around with this even more. But that is basically the gist of it, and some extra miscellaneous nonsense thrown in there. But now you know how to create a toggle button in CSS, HTML, and a tiny little bit of JavaScript. Maybe at some point, if it is requested, I may either write or record a tutorial on how to do that with checkboxes, so you don't actually need any JavaScript, and you also get the added benefit of being able to record that value with a form. Alright, so yeah, that was basically it. You can play with this as you want. One last thing before I go, check out my website, rolanditzar.pro/streaming. You can get my streaming schedule from there, and you can also find my projects and downloads, etc. if you want. I'm working on my blog, that's coming very soon, and my CSS blog will also be here very soon, so look out for those. But yes, until next time, whenever I put another video, I'm Roland Taylor, aka Roland Ditzar. Thank you for watching. Hope you have a great day, night, or whatever time you watch this. And I hope you produce some good stuff with CSS.